what's going on, guys? The time is finally here. We've managed to build and fully finished our Warlock. So now we're going to have a look at the Marvel Legends Warlock Wave, the Build-A-Figure Warlock. Now for Warlock, you would have to jump back to the 80s to see his first appearance as he debuted in New Mutants number 18 back in August 1984. Trying to get his legs as straight as I possibly can, you would be looking at a 10-inch figure of the Build-A-Figure Warlock. So he's a lot taller, certainly warrants the fact that he would have been a Build-A-Figure versus maybe the likes of, like a Jubilee or Rocket Raccoon, as we've seen as some more on the embarrassing ends of the Build-A-Figures. Here we have a fully realized, fully tall standing Warlock, and I think he really actually turned out quite good. He did come with one interchangeable hand, as we've seen in the review. Try not to drop it. And you'll see one consistent trend with basically everything on Warlock here is this black plastic washed with the gold. And one of the interchangeable hands was this rotating, non-rotating blade that you could swap out for his hand. You just simply unplug that and replace it with the hand that you want to use. And you can have a closed fist, or you can also have, again, that spinning buzzsaw blade, which I think looks really cool. I just wish he would actually spin. The figure itself is glorious. Like, super, super cool, full of details, full of beautiful looking sculpts. The one thing I didn't do, though, is I didn't plug these in. This is about the only thing that I would nitpick about the figure, is that the hoses that connect from the elbow area or the forearm area into the back area plug sockets of his torso, I don't feel like are nearly long enough that I probably would be more inclined to leave them completely out, because any time that you want to move the figure's arms forward or back, or even out for that matter, it's going to pull these out, which is about the only downside I would say to Warlock here. But again, like he looks so good. It's funny that you can take essentially a figure that is just all one color. I mean, he literally is just, if you were to wash away all this gold, you'd be looking at just a black plastic figure. But it's funny that you can incorporate just a wash of a single color and you get all these cool recessed areas of detail. His face is just awesome. Bring the camera in here so you guys can see. I love this somewhat hair that he's got going on here. The eyes and the teeth are really about the only areas that are saved from this gold that makes up the majority, if not all, of his body. All you can see is the little individual circuitry and the little individual panels. I mean, there's so much to look at for this figure. Even the areas in between his thigh and his lower waist. I mentioned that he kind of looks a little bit like C-3PO, and it's really more so like the torso area here. I certainly don't think that his arms, his very large arms, his hands, or his very large feet read as C-3PO, but kind of like this area here looks a little bit like C-3PO, and I wonder if maybe there was a little bit of inspiration that may have came from that. I do like the large size of his arms. Again, the fact that he's a tall figure goes a long way for me. This is definitely a figure that if you had made that into a standard 6.5, 7-inch Marvel Legends, I would feel robbed. I honestly would feel like this guy needs and deserved to be a full-sized, fully realized Build-A-Figure. Just to give you guys a size comparison as well, get him to, again, properly stand. About the only thing, too, that I'm finding a little bit of an issue is his legs. But if we take the tallest figure from this wave, which just so happens to be Colossus, you can see how much taller Warlock is to Colossus. Colossus goes to about maybe his mid to high area of his chest, while you've still got a full additional head towering him over the other Marvel Legends figures. We take, for example, Cyclops, who is a little bit more accurate to an average size Marvel Legend figure. And you can again see that he goes to about midpoint on the torso area here. Move these guys out of the way. I'm sure they will be coming back soon enough. For his posability, his head is on that ball joint, as well as you got the hinge up and down. The arms do hinge outward. They're a little stiff. At least this one here is stiff. But you can see you get the full range. The arm does move outward, full all the way around rotation. He does have a double bend in the elbow, which is nice. The hands when properly plugged in, do have a hinge and rotate. When you do rotate them though, especially the fist end of it, it does hit the side. If I can show you here, the side of the forearm. So when you rotate it, you might find a couple of times that you pop the fist out inadvertently, not intentionally. The same thing can be said for the larger spread out hand, which I like the fact that they're not just two fists. This gives you a little bit more personality. They could have also done that on this other side as well, but I probably will end up displaying him more so with the buzzsaw blade, because I think that looks kind of neat. He has the upper torso ball joint. Doesn't get as much range as you would expect, because he has a very narrow gap really to move from. Really this much clearance is what allots you for being able to move the figure up and down and left and right. He doesn't seem to have any waist swivel, but he does have a good range of motion on the legs, a forward and back motion out, a swivel on the thigh. Essentially, basically where the thigh connects to the socket of the lower waist is where it does rotate. He does have a double hinge on the knee, and he does also have a hinge back and forth on the foot and an ankle pivot. I was actually surprised to think that this would be a figure that I would love so much. I did read New Mutants growing up, but not really a lot. I was kind of more the guy that was getting into the X-Men stuff. New Mutants I saw on the back burner, so to speak. I always knew of Warlock as he was that interesting looking guy. He was just made up of stuff. It was the hardest way to try to describe him. But he was an interesting enough character. I just didn't really follow much of his exploits when I was growing up. But I think the design of the character translates extremely well here in plastic form. I couldn't really have thought of a better Build-A-Figure than this guy right here, because he does have a lot of cool aspects that really could only be shared by making the figure as tall as they made him. He may not be necessarily my favorite of the Build-A-Figures in recent memory, but he's definitely up there. I would say he may potentially be of the top 5 best Build-A-Figures, maybe in the last year, couple of years or so. Again, he's not my top 3, but I definitely would say he's one of the top 10 by far. So there is, in a nutshell, that would be Warlock, now finished. We basically can just close up shop and go home for the day. But before we do that, let's talk about the figures that made up this wave, and let's talk about some of my personal favorites, as we always do on this channel. Now, I had to struggle a bit trying to think of what my favorite figure from this wave was. I may have ultimately landed my decision on going with Cyclops, because Cyclops here is in my favorite costume, and his colorings are so good. The only detriment I can make to the figure is these really poor areas of the boots that want to continue to slide down. If I could glue that, or if I can just get them to stay in place, that would be the only strike I could make about the figure. So I can't really say he's my least favorite or not of the top 3, solely because just the way everything on him comes together. So I would say Cyclops here is my favorite figure from this wave. Running close to that, and very, very close I might add, I would say my next favorite figure is Polaris. Sure, she doesn't have the X-Factor costume, which I kind of like a little bit more for Polaris, but I have to admit the outfit is so good and the face sculpt is so decent that she had to make my top 3. Lastly, of all things, and you're probably going to say, really? You picked this one? I would say my other favorite is Dazzler. Dazzler! There's something about that head sculpt, and just for the fact that they would entertain the idea of giving us this retro design version of Dazzler, I dig it. I also like the fact that she got roller skates. I don't know, something about roller skates and the fact that she's got the bell bottoms on. I would say Dazzler is my 3rd favorite figure from this wave, if I can actually get her to properly stand with those roller skates, which sometimes can be an issue to get to stand. Those are my 3 favorite figures from this wave. My least favorite figures are not necessarily because they're bad figures, but for example, I like Sunfire, but he's just not really based on a character that I really liked. I don't have a lot of invested interest in it. The figure design is good, but he's just not a figure based on the source material. I never really never really followed Sunfire, so for that reason I don't really, again, I have as much interest in that figure. I have to actually say my least favorite figure is this guy right here. is Colossus. And it really only chalks up to the fact that his paint's a little poor on the thigh area, and the fact that his head sits so far up on his neck. Those are small gripes, yes, but I would say that's enough to put him as my least favorite figure from this wave. But the wave is so strong that even for me to say that this is my least favorite figure, that's basically like my least favorite of my favorite. Like, the wave as a whole was so good. This is a least favorite, but it's a far cry from some of the really poor Marvel Legends that we've gotten in recent memories. The Old Man Logan is good as well. The Shatterstar is also an equally good figure, but I would say that these are my 3 favorite figures from the Warlock wave. Having now watched all these videos, and I would hope that you guys watched all these videos, what are your favorite 3 figures from this particular wave? And what do you guys think of Warlock as your Build-A-Figure? Let me know down below. Always enjoy reading your guys' comments. I try my best to try to respond back to the comments as you guys post them. Sometimes this becomes a little bit more difficult because I'm always posting new comments, but I always try to reply back and discuss stuff with you. I love discussing your opinions on what you guys think, good or bad. I mean, you may not necessarily think that Cyclops was the best figure from this wave, but I like to chat back and forth with you guys and let me know and, you know, find out what you guys think of them. Even though we have finished technically this entire wave, there's tons of videos still coming your way, guys. Lots of horror reviews, unboxings, collectibles, more figures, more retro goodies, more throwbacks. Lots of videos always hitting this channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would ask, what are you waiting for? Hit that little subscribe button down below. You won't miss future videos hitting this channel. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. See you next time.